Just waiting for Aaron Long to show up. It's been a while. I suspect we'll spend some time talking about Aimee Byrd as the forensic research continues on her, the OPC. Here is Aaron now. He's checking in. Yeah, it's been a few weeks. Took a vacation, was with family.
Can you see me?
I can see you.
Sorry, my hip. I'm trying to get my hip straightened out because my hip went out on me. So I'm gonna stand up for a second.
Okay.
Well, now look at you all wearing your sweatsuit and everything.
Yeah, I'm chilling out today.
Well, we've missed you, Donald.
Yeah, my computer went down and it took a while to get that fixed. And then, yeah, it's been about 3 weeks maybe.
It has been. And I've been excited. Hopefully you've gotten through your Aimee Byrd.
I just ordered the last 3 books. I think she's got 7.
Yeah.
I'm gonna have to double check that. And I'm working on the 4th book. Hope in Our Scars. She's written maybe 3 books since the famous Recovering from Biblical Manhood and Womanhood in 2021, but they were sniffing around in 2019, the OPC, some of them. And between then and then that book in 2021, there was a lot of stuff going on inside the OPC. And part of the bigger problem was that some online OPCers were using extravagant language, abusive language, and like 75 to 100 OPC pastors, and it was happening in a Facebook.
Oh, I was involved. I know what was going on there.
In Geneva Commons?
Yeah.
That's been closed down now. I can't find it.
That's because it's gone. And the thing is, Donald, here is where I had the issue. Which is worse? Harsh language that hurts people's feelings or outright Satanism that she was supporting? The OPC accepted the Satanism and rejected the harsh language. And to me, they sold their soul the moment they did that. Everything that was harsh that was said about her was true. And yet the denomination would rather deal with a bunch of steers and queers than genuine Christians. The girl should have been booted and excommunicated in 2019, and nobody in her local church, in her presbytery, or in the denomination had the testicular fortitude to actually be Christian men like they should have. She should have been disciplined. She should have been called to the mat, and she should have been either corrected or gotten rid of.
I'm still tracing all of that. I reread the wallpaper book, Recovering from Biblical Manhood and Womanhood, which the giveaway is in the title, Recovering From, which is a play on the book put out by Piper and I want to say Grudem.
Yes.
On recovering biblical manhood and womanhood. Well, she's stuck in the preposition recovering from, but she's crafty.
Well, but see, the thing is, Donald, if you have studied how the Satanism got into the main line, she didn't come up with anything new. All of her arguments are exactly what was used in the United Church of Christ and the PCUSA and all that back during the 60s and 70s.
Well, I'm starting to open up that can of worms, women's ordination, pro and against, and because these have never been issues in my orbit.
Mhm.
The same for the homosexuality issue. That's been a 2-minute problem, you
Well,
know?
see, I've been fighting that battle the whole time I've been in the church.
So, wow. I've been in reformed contexts where that's just not even discussed. But so, anyways, I'm getting some of these hot button issues out in front of me. I just got Greg Johnson that he pulled out of the PCA. His book, he got one book, I think, on the market, and I want to track down more about him and whatever this Revoice thing is.
Well, Revoice is what they call side B Christianity. And what that means is that they believe that people are innately born homosexual. And as long as they're not engaging in sodomy, they can walk around and claim to be the biggest queers that are on the face of the earth. Well, it's basically rejecting what Jesus said on the Sermon on the Mount, where it is the sin doesn't come from the action, the sin comes from your heart and works itself out into the action.
Yeah, yeah, it's still sin, and even if you are gay, you shouldn't go walking around bragging that you're gay. Who walks around bragging that they're a heterosexual? Nobody does that. Uh,
But
I
I'm just glad you're walking into this because this has been something that I have been shouting about since I got involved through Facebook with these confessional churches. And I think they all, at the beginning anyway, looked at me as some crazy person. And what they don't understand is I am coming out of the wreckage of what this stuff did, and they're just happily skipping down the highway to hell the main line did.
One of the things that I notice about Amy Byrd is she's a major distraction.
Mm-hmm.
She is, number one, she's not a systematic theologian, and that's obvious. She's never confessional. She's not an exegete. She's not a church historian. Is she a good storyteller? Yep. And she will sit there and talk a mile a minute, hour after hour, and you will miss the major loci of theology.
But see, Donald, that is exactly, I am thoroughly impressed you picked up on that. And as I say that, I should have expected you to, with you being the forensic theologian you are. But what you just described, Donald, is how they took over the main line. Because of, and let me, if do I have a moment to go through some history?
Yeah.
The main line, even during the 20s when they were fighting off the Darwinian liberalism, was still very highly intellectual. The people Machen fought, even though I would have sided with Machen, I could still confidently say had solid rational minds. Do you understand? Give the enemy the credit that he's due.
Yeah. Yeah.
What ends up happening is that with the rise of Bardianism and neo-orthodoxy, and with the rise of the prominence of biblical theology over systematic theology.
Yeah, that's a discussion for another day because I never understood that tension. But go ahead, keep going.
What you get is a softening of intellectual standards. And as the intellectual standards softened, it even bled off the better minds on the liberal end of things, to where you get this rise of storytelling. And that's what church became about. And I could even include the awakening that happened under Billy Graham and all of them, to where emotionalism crept into the church. The first sign you see in the main line of this emotionalism really taking root is the charismatic renewal movement. And they end up building off of that. Neo-orthodoxy has already gutted the intellectual standards. The charismatic renewal brings in the emotional experiential predominance. And then what you get is this rise of these bad players, that it's not about what the confession says. It's not even about what the Bible says exactly. It is about my experience and my story.
And,
Now, I'm going to give you
and then
an
in all the long talking, that was one of the first things that struck me about Byrd. She's a long talker.
yeah.
And pretty soon, what's the main point here? And she's fantastic at it. It's
Well,
a
and Donald, if you ever wondered why it seems like I am as harsh and I am as shouty as I am, it is because I discovered in seminary the only way I could make them listen was to get ugly about it, was to get nasty about it, was to become, I had to learn to use weaponized terms like Satanism and heretic and all of that, because only when I hit them in the heart, only when I had a dead on body shot or a dead on head shot would they shut up and listen. And basically, these white knights in the OPC that said, oh, you can't hurt her feelings. Oh, she's a woman. Oh, da, 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 da. They're the same demon worshipers she is, because what they're doing is paving the way for her to bring this devilry into the OPC. They're a bunch of castrated steers that are more worried about a satanic witch's feelings than the Westminster Confession that they lied when they said they subscribed to.
What is it that you see Aimee Byrd doing?
What I see her doing is trying to introduce the same corruption that destroyed the main line into Machen's denomination.
Are you talking about the women's ordination?
Women's ordination is always the camel getting its nose under the tent. You start off, well, first of all, you start off by weakening the theology. Then you creep in with women's ordination. And let me explain this real quick.
Now,
All
she
right.
has said she's against that, but I don't believe her.
Well, and yes, she would, because that's the easiest way of saying it. Women's ordination starts here. It starts with, we have all these empty rural churches because we can't seem to get enough men to go to seminary. Well, Edna May down the road, she's been a Sunday school teacher for umpteen years. She's a contributor to the Women's Fellowship. She's done all this for the church. Let's let her preach one Sunday. She's been wanting to preach. Everybody loves her. So then they start pushing that through. And then all of a sudden, they see they can gain some ground. So, well, we believe that everybody has the right to an education. Let's let them go to seminary. So then they go to seminary, and then the denomination becomes completely pragmatic because we need pastors. So they start ordaining these women.
So are
And
you saying that Aimee Byrd is been hiding but is really seeking women's ordination?
absolutely. She's doing the exact same thing. Her language, the way she does it, the way she interacts. The OPC has not paid attention to what has happened in the main line. They rejected the main line, and I understand under Machen why they did what they did. But they crawled into their ghetto and they did not pay attention to what was going on around them. So now they've got the same attack coming against them that they launched at the main line.
You know what was one of the striking things was how meteoric her rise was. She was on with Dr. Carl Truman
Mhm.
and Todd Pruitt on their podcast, Mortification of Spin.
Mhm.
He gave articles to Table Talk of Ligonier Ministries. She had articles posted on Alliance of Confessing Evangelicals. Zondervan Publishing published some of her books, and even Presbyterian and Reformed, which is a conservative confessional Presbyterian body, even they published a couple of books. And she was invited to speak at Covenant Seminary. That was raised questions for some, but she had this very high level profile in the Presbyterial world.
And Donald, here is the
And
problem.
slowly but surely, every one of those began pulling back their support. And so all of her blogs, posts, articles at Alliance of Confessing Evangelical, Mortification of Spin, and elsewhere were pulled. You can't get them. So slowly but surely, she was pushed out of those contexts.
But my problem is they gave her a platform at all. It shows a deficiency in the confessional reformed world. She did nothing that wasn't done before, but they're so sure and they're so certain that they're right that they're not paying attention to the lessons of the past. They allowed her to have a platform she should never have been allowed to have. And when she was being called out, they condemned those who called her out.
How long? Now, Mike Spangler got in trouble with the OPC over her too.
Right. And they literally put him on a 2-year censorship for speaking the truth.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, I
They have driven him into the arms of the chemist. Spangler could have been one of their greatest pastors. He was deadly loyal to them. And they drove him out in favor of that demonic witch because he had the audacity to call her what she was.
called her a ruthless wolf.
That's called, how is that ugly? It's the truth.
One couple of things about her that I'm pondering. I think she has an anxiety problem.
Yeah.
When you read her books, you see she'll ask about 30 questions, like she's anxious to get an answer, but she never has a really good answer.
All right, Donald, let me give
But
you a
also,
different.
secondly, I think there's narcissism, personality disorder, possibly. I'm not a psych.
Mhm.
But every single page, she brings every story back to herself. Me, I. It is constantly about who Amy is.
All right, Donald, let me give you a different take from coming from the leftist.
Coming where?
All right, you know, from the leftist side, you know, and you've heard me say before, I had to study all of the primary leftist texts when I was in school, the leftist political text. I would like for us to get into that at some point or another.
Political texts in
The
seminary?
political, yeah.
That's another front I'm going to open up is
But
wokeism. I
but
have never, you know,
let me explain what she was doing, because what she was doing, Donald, was not actual insecurity. It was a purposeful tact.
yes, And by the way, she was forced or asked when this is in 2021,
Mhm.
her session is trying to work with her. Apparently, she's getting some support, but there's one elder who's not supporting her. They got her to go to a psychiatrist. And and she writes about this in her book. And the psychiatrist said, "Why do you think you need to be a missionary in your own home church?" Now, that question he asked was very telling, if she's quoting it accurately, that she viewed herself as on a mission in the OPC with an agenda and a game. And she said that question really rocked her. Because why, she asked, why should I be a missionary in my own church? They're supposed to be ministering to me, not me to them. So she's got this mission-oriented, goal-oriented perspective.
Okay.
She was playing a game.
Donald Saul Alinsky. What she is doing is using Saul Alinsky's rules for radicals.
Wittingly or unwittingly?
Wittingly. It is too well constructed to be unwitting. She is causing herself and all of her works to be seen as a victim of an oppressive system. Okay, hold on.
Big time, big time, big time.
That is rules for radicals. You make yourself look like the victim.
Which is a part of narcissism and sociopathy.
Right. But this is actually what rules for radicals says you are to do. You make yourself look like the victim. You identify the single strongest opponent you may have. She did that with Spangler and with his crowd. You make them look like they are abusing you, and all the weaker men around them will surround them and attack them in your favor because they don't want to see you be victimized.
Time observation you're making, because she plays the victim card repeatedly.
Right.
And I don't know if she identifies by name any of her accusers. She does go after the Southeast Presbytery. She goes after their incompetence. So I'm still tracking that whole story down because they had a
She went after him by name behind the scenes. Because if she would have went after them by name in public, it would have hurt her victimhood. It would have made her look retaliatory. She needed to be martyred in the public view. She constantly needed to be seen as the victim, because if she was seen as the victim, it would make Spangler and them look like they were abusive men. Then she could play off the innate egalitarianism that exists within society to gain support for her cause.
What prompts her? What's her inner drive?
Her inner
Self-absorption?
No, her inner drive is to push into the OPC what has happened in the mainline. She is a crusader, not a missionary. She looks like a missionary because she plays the weak woman card constantly.
That's her first book, Housewife Theologian. That's on its way here by
Right.
a week or so. But what arrogance, with no background, nothing.
But Donald,
To write about theology. With all my reading and background, I haven't got the arrogance to write a book. There's too many other great classics that I got to listen to.
Donald,
This
stop
is
for
where
a
I think narcissism comes in, because she has a vision of grandeur about herself.
But Donald, stop for a second. All of those books behind you to the left mean absolutely nothing, because they're nothing but the opinions of dead white men. What these people want to hear are the lived experiences of the oppressed.
So they're anti-intellectual, really.
Yes, that's what I just said. Intellectualism and wokeism in all of its forms All right, Donald, all wokeism is cultural. How much study have you done in this yet?
On this what?
On the wokeism issue? Because see, all of these things go hand in hand.
I have not read a single book on it.
Let me,
This wokeism is developing. I'm looking at the homosexual issue that's developing. Three, the women's ordination issue. And four, Aimee Byrd. So I've
but
got really these are hot button issues that I never deal with on a
okay.
day-to-day basis or my local church.
All right, Donald, let me give you a brief primer. All
Yep,
right.
I'm all ears.
And we're going to go back to, and I had to learn all this in seminary. So when I say this, I was literally taught this. We're going to go back to the rise of Bardianism. Would you agree with me that Bardianism gutted the church's intellectual basis?
I would say it was subjectivism with a cover up.
Right. So anytime you go with subjectivism, intellectualism gets thrown out the window.
Yeah.
Because all subjectivism is postmodern theology, postmodern philosophy, excuse me. All right. While all this is going on in the political scene in the 1930s, you have this group of academics, and they're all Marxist at Frankfurt University.
Yes.
Hitler is getting ready to purge the Marxists. So America allows these Marxists to come over. Well, since they taught at Frankfurt, they got positions at Columbia, at Harvard, at Yale. And what they create after watching what Stalin did in Russia. When they watch what these Marxists watch what Stalin did in Russia at the end of World War II, they realize that communism is a failed experiment, that communism cannot actually exist the way they hoped it could in Russia. So they translate Marxist ideology away from an economic basis to a cultural basis. They create cultural Marxism. Now, what the Frankfurt School is all based off of cultural Marxism. Cultural Marxism is saying, instead of it being the proletariat versus the bourgeoisie, it is the oppressed versus the oppressor. So if you're a woman, it's going against the patriarchy. If you're homosexual, it's going against the heteronormative standard. If you are Black, it's going against the white man in America. Do you understand what I'm saying? It's something that can be translated. It's just oppressor versus oppressee. But it's still that same Marxist revolutionary mindset. They take over higher education. So you have this channel of people that are being educated by these cultural Marxists being shipped into the seminaries because the seminaries required an academic degree to be admitted. So you're getting first students that have already been formed by cultural Marxism, and later professors that have been formed by cultural Marxism coming into the seminaries. Then when you get to Vietnam, what you've got is a scenario where you have all these leftist draft dodgers realizing that if they go to, they may be atheists, but if they go to seminary, they can dodge the draft.
Yeah, I remember that.
So they flock in. Well, all of a sudden, they've got these masters of divinities or whatever, and they need a job. So they go through the ordination, even though they don't believe in Christianity, they go through the ordination process because it's a job. And I mean, back during the late 60s, early 70s, you could make a solid career out of being a clergyman, especially in the main line, because they had all the big churches, they had the big endowments. But politically, what they are professional revolutionaries for whatever cause. And they end up taking over. In the UCC around here, it was that whole Chavez thing,
And
that
once
black.
again, well, let me interject. While you're describing this drift, this shift, it is once again implicit that the major loci of systematic theology is slowly being given up.
Right, because they can't use it. What they can use, though, are people's personal experience. And we had already been softened up. The Billy Graham revivals, all the rest of this. America in the 50s loved them some Billy Graham. And I'm not saying Billy Graham has bad theology, but I'm saying I've talked about this in Bible study before. I'm teaching my Wednesday nights on worship, and I've explained this to them. If you look at your standard Baptist service or whatever, all it is a revival service that's been translated to Sunday morning. And if you look at it, it's Nevin nailed it on the head in the anxious bench back in the 1840s. It's all psychological trickery. You soften the people up with the music. You have music, you have testimonies that get the people softened up till the preacher gets to the sermon. And what the preacher does is he doesn't exegete the scripture. He creates an emotional experience that culminates in the altar call. And I've always said Billy Graham would build up until he got to that point in the altar call and the emotion was in his voice and he had the people on their feet and they're weeping and they're crying and he gives the free offer of the gospel and bam, George Beverly Shea busts into Just As I Am. And the people start pouring down the aisles, crying. None of this has anything to do with theology. It has to do with psychological manipulation. Well, you've got a church that is being pastored by leftists that are starting to learn the psychological manipulation techniques of the Second Great Awakening. And what they do is they stop using theology, they stop using the scripture text, and they say, we're going to talk about stories. Well, the people in the pew, the laity, because they've been so badly catechized, think we can relate to stories. We can relate to the experience, shared experiences
Well,
we
bringing
all
that
have.
back to Aimee Byrd, I can see the storytelling as a tool of manipulation by her
Bingo.
very clearly. And then raising some straw men and then talking forever with more
Mhm.
storytelling. And you keep wondering, where is this going?
When I did my seminar in seminary on homiletics, the man who was Barack Obama's pastor
Oh, Jeremy,
taught, yeah,
right?
Jeremiah Wright taught the seminar. And he
Oh,
told
he
us,
was your,
he wasn't a professor. He came to the seminary as a guest lecturer and did a seminar on homiletics.
oh boy.
And he told us that don't worry about the 3 points. Don't worry about the exegesis. What you need to worry about is telling the story and conveying the point you're trying to get across. And he talked about how he had used the things like the GD America and all that. That he didn't really actually believe. He told us he didn't really actually believe in that, but for his congregation, he could use that sort of rhetoric to militarize them because he was appealing to a sense of oppression that they felt.
He created.
Well, you understand what I'm saying.
I take your point. So
All of these,
going back to Byrd, that argues that she's got a preliminary game plan before she starts the manipulative game.
and I tried to tell them this back then, and nobody would listen because I was educated at Lancaster. I don't know anything. It doesn't matter that I spent my formative years in this den of snakes
Yep.
because I wasn't a Westminster man or because I wasn't a covenant man. I couldn't possibly know anything.
Yeah. like my pastor said on Sunday, that we Reformed confessional people have a reputation for being proud. And he said that is sinful. And we of all people should have a reputation for humility and meekness because of the sovereign grace and goodness of God. We didn't get anything by ourselves. But Reformed theology have always, as forget who said it, always ended up with busy beehives of academic, you know, pursuits and libraries. So we can be thankful for that, but we must pride applies to anybody. You know
But
that
my view got my observations, my clarion call. I was Jeremiah outside the walls crying out, wasn't listened to because I didn't have the right pedigree.
gotcha. You sniffed her out very early.
Yes, Donald, she's not doing anything new. All right. And you want me to talk? Okay, here we have to talk about.
What game plan did she come with, and was her agenda hidden? Is that your point?
It's not my point, it's the truth of the matter. And I would argue, had we not made such a stink, she would have snaked her way in and still been there, and the OPC would be considering ordaining women at this point.
Yeah,
There was just enough ruckus raised that they were forced to actually look at things.
yeah,
And because of her hubris, she would have been smarter. And I'm going to say this, her hubris was her Achilles heel.
yeah.
Because had she not gone on the podcast, had she not gotten all that instant publicity, she would be there today and the OPC would be gone. It would be no more than another mainline denomination. But she had to make it about herself.
There you go. There you go. About herself, narcissism, great vision of grandeur about herself. I think I'm pondering narcissistic personality disorder, where she is totally
This,
disabled and dysfunctional
but
with
this is one
pride.
case. This is one case, Donald. You should be thankful she has it. Because had she been like the ones that, and I'll give you an example from the Episcopal Church. In 1976, I think Peter said it was 14 women got ordained.
I think it was 11.
Okay. I
Whatever.
keep wanting to say seven. That doesn't really matter. What matters
Yeah.
to what I'm getting ready to say is this, is you see intersectionality play out. And I will get to the intersectionality issue concept of wokeness here in a second. However many women, we'll say it's 11, got ordained. Well, they got ordained, they got into churches, and guess what 7 of those 11 turned out to be?
Gay?
Lesbians. So when the gay ordination issue came up, guess what they said? You've already done it. And our congregations love us. So there's no real issue here. They gave them Satan's deal. You've already taken that step. You might as well continue on down. Because see, these wokies will create what they call intersectionality, where oppression ends up intersecting. And it gets to the point where you need to be a black, lesbian, transgender, whatever, and you have the ultimate authority because you're clearly the most oppressed because you belong to all these oppressed groups.
You know, going back to feminism, I got to maybe open a front on that too.
Well,
This I've heard
feminism is
this.
actually Satanism, but
When this was beginning to develop, of course, I spent my time in the military, all men in my day. I think back to my great grandparents, who on both sides were farmers
mhm.
and had several kids, and they're out on their 100, 200 acres. Great grandpa's, doing the land, and great grandma's in the house, making the food and doing. They didn't think in terms of victimhood and oppression.
They
That
didn't
wasn't.
they didn't have time to. They were
They didn't.
working.
They didn't have time to. It was, how do we work together? Dad's out there with the boys in the summer, and the mom's home in the house with the girls. They're cleaning. No, but they did. And so it never crossed my mind. And then when my mother was well educated. She was a strong woman. She would once in a while get a little too strong with my dad, and my dad would put his hand up and he goes, June, you know what I get like when you get like this. And I saw that a number of times because with us kids, I joke that she taught me Calvinism by the way she lived. She was sovereign.
Mhm.
But I was forever glad that my dad had the gonads, the cojones, to put my mother in her place. My mother was an only child,
Mhm.
well educated. She was a department head of cardiology, nurse as a nurse. Uh, she was strong. She had to be quiet as a minister's wife. She did that well. But I had a father who had a pair. He
Mhm.
had cojones. Uh, he wasn't mean. When I say that, he wasn't, you know, in fact, Aimee Byrd tips her hand in recovering from. She says this OPC thinks about hyper machismo
Mhm.
and for the woman hyper submissiveness. That's not. I came through OPC contexts. You didn't hear them going around men saying I'm the big shot and you got to submit to me. And I mean that didn't come up. Men and women were married, and so she's, I don't know, I'm still assessing it.
Donald, I'm just telling you, I don't know whether she's a plant or she came to it of her own accord. I am leaning toward she's much like Finnick because, in a strange way, I really think Finnick was a plant from the Church of England into the Free Church to destroy it, either convert it or destroy it. And I think he just went off the rails. I think Aimee Byrd was probably in some way, shape, or form co-opted by people in the PCUSA to either convert or destroy the OPC. And she got caught up in her own hubris, and it ended up destroying her in doing that. That said, I'm going to tell you, these people, these Alinskyeites, whatever you want to call them, they don't quit. They don't stop. If they fail in one way, they will figure out another way to come at it. Marxism in all of its forms, whether it be cultural, social, political, economic, Marxism in all of its forms is a religion birthed out of Christianity, but it is no longer Christianity. It is a
Sounds like
form,
power worship.
it is a form of Gnosticism, Donald. The entire left is a rebirth of Gnosticism. If you don't believe me, what they teach in leftist circles is, as far as morality goes, either complete hedonism or complete uh, asceticism.
Asceticism.
They believe that the physical form is of no value, that the spirit is all that matters. If you don't believe me, look at the whole concept of being transgender. Why do they accept transgenderism? Because it doesn't matter, because it is the spirit that is more important. It doesn't matter if you're a man or a woman. It's a form of neo-Gnosticism that has crept in. They're working toward a utopia. The old God is the devil, and the new God is the true God that came to bring the secret knowledge. Well, they're the ones that are the bearers of the secret knowledge. And they will utilize, just like their Gnostic forefathers, Christianity as a shell to carry their message through.
I could see that connection between Gnosticism and this pansexuality. I could see that.
But you
Body
got to
is
remember,
body is bad, spirit is
mhm,
good, so body doesn't matter. And in fact, speaking of that, I've been looking at the pro homo, pro fudge packer volumes or works. And consistently, like when they come to Genesis 19 and Sodom and Gomorrah, or Judges 19 with what, the Levite, who
oh, you know, you want me to
they
call it?
say that the issue is, like in Sodom and Gomorrah, isn't about consensual, loving, homosexual.
No,
It's about gang rape.
right.
And
Well,
so
Donald,
it's about gang rape.
I was taught in seminary in my Old Testament class that David and Jonathan were in a loving homosexual
Yeah,
relationship.
that too. Yeah, they throw that in there. Yep.
And this is
How did your seminary handle Leviticus 18 and 20 on the, where
my seminary said that well, number one, you've got to remember they did not believe that the Bible was even inspired. They believed that the Bible was a historic document that had very important things. And what they called those stories were cultural remnants that no longer apply today.
okay, that's so they threw it out.
And they reject Paul outright. So Romans 1 is gone.
Oh gosh. Seminaries are, I think I was kind of protected and uh shielded from some of that in my background. Although at Westminster we had to read a lot of those guys. My specialty was Bultmann, although we read some Barth and others, Ernst Kosman and so
I
forth.
had to read all of them, but yeah, by the time I got there, theology was primarily focused on Matthew Fox
On
and
who?
Matthew Fox process theology,
Process. Okay, yeah. Yeah.
because they were all about process theology because it fits better in with a weird form of softened Darwinian view of the world.
Yeah.
They drew a lot from Teilhard de Chardin and a lot of
Yep.
his writings.
Yeah. Total crap burner. Theology shard.
But no, Donald, we could spend weeks talking about this because the thing is, and it's the culmination of stuff I've been trying to say for years now. The confessional churches have to wake up. They have been living in ghettos for way too long, whether it be the PCA, the OPC, the Missouri Synod, whether it be any of these churches. They have been comfortably snug in their little cultural ghettos. And they have not seen the levels of depravity that the world has dropped to. So now we've got a chance to send these snakes and spies in because they've softened their children up through secular education and they can start to corrupt the entire system because the left will not quit. They
What
will,
do you recommend to get out of the ghetto?
to get
For
out of the ghetto, they need to get back in. Well, strangely enough, this is going to sound odd. What I have seen in those circles that is the most successful is actually forcing people out of the churches into active social service and evangelism. Because what it does is it puts people in contact with the world around them. All right, your typical Missouri Synod Lutheran Church or OPC church or ARP church or whatever, they may have a food pantry, they may have this, they may have that, but most of what they do is engaging within their own community. When you force them, and it's why honestly, it's why I have that banner put up over the door. I don't know if you've ever paid attention to it when you came here. The only banner in this whole church sits over the door at the top of the ramp that everybody has to look at on the way out. And what it says is you are now entering your mission field.
We have a sign as we're exiting the parking lot to the same effect.
Well, you have
a metal sign.
right. You have to force them out of their comfort zone. And I'm going to tell you what I did here that changed everything. It literally started with, I tried to attempt in my first 2 years here to get a youth group together. And we never could quite get it off the ground with the kids in the church because of travel ball and this and that and the other, and the kids couldn't get together. So finally I went to consistory and I said, you want a youth group? Here's how we're going to do it. I had gotten stopped by a school bus right outside the trailer park beside the fire department down here. And I counted 27 Hispanic children getting on the school bus in that trailer park. And I started doing some research, and I could go 2 miles up the road one way and 2 miles down the road the other way. And there were all these trailer parks and sort of developments off the road you couldn't see from the road. I said, we are going to go into these trailer parks. And what we're going to do is we're going to find somebody there that will allow us to set up, and we're going to cook hot dogs, and we're going to have chips and drinks and games and stuff. And a week before, we're going to put door hangers on everybody's doors in the trailer parks to invite them to this event. So we did that. And then while the kids all came out for their free hot dogs and their free drinks and all the rest of this and the games, and the parents came, we started collecting names and addresses. And we invited them all, saying, we will run the bus. We're not even going to run the van. We're not even going to make the parents bring them. We'll come pick your kids up every Thursday. From 5 until 6 on Thursday, we'll have homework assistants, because I had a bunch of retired teachers in the congregation that were excited about doing that. They would meet with the kids, help them with their homework, make contact with the schools. I will have a social worker here if there is a problem with the children in the schools, whether it be behavioral or whatever. And then we will have a 2-hour youth group afterward where we serve a meal to these kids, because most of them were disadvantaged. And then we did that. And I said, at Christmas, we'll do an angel tree for these kids. Sunday mornings, we'll go pick them up and bring them in. So we started to do that. And I ended up at one point in time with 52 kids a week we were picking up and bringing in.
Wow.
And what it did was, I had said this in a sermon a couple of years before that, about a year before we started this, Paul's Chapel is going to have to get a lot less white if it wants to survive. And I said, it's because the neighborhood is changing, not because of any sort of political motivation, but a church needs to be embodied in its community. Well, all of a sudden, we've got all these little black and brown kids coming to church every Sunday. Then some of their parents start coming to church. And then we had a drive whenever I got into a fight with the city council over the homeless shelter. I got put on the board of the homeless shelter, and we had some people rise up and wanted to start a program in the church, which they did, where they were going out on Friday night and picking all these people up from the homeless shelter. And they were helping them find jobs, and they were helping them get on their feet and we had a bunch of success stories from that too. People that were in the shelter now live on their own and do all the rest of this. And we took in black members and we took in Hispanic members. And by the time you get to 2020 and the shutdown, we were probably at about 140 a Sunday in a completely multiracial, multicultural church. And the members were forced to look outside of their comfort zone.
Gotcha.
Now, people say, well, that's doing nothing but what the liberals are doing. Absolutely, it's doing exactly what the liberals want to do. But the thing is since I was the pastor, I could stand up and solidly catechize these people. I could teach them the Heidelberg. I could engage with them on deeper theological. I could make them think. Now, I had to learn to be able to communicate in a way they could all understand better, which has shaped my preaching style to a degree to where a lot of Reformed people would just reject the way I preach outright. And you've heard me preach. I don't preach like many Reformed pastors do. But I had to learn how to shape the way I preach to be able to convey the information. It's like the Anglicans always had a fit because they say I wasn't doing the prayer book when I was doing the 1662 to the letter. What they didn't understand was my tonality, my movement, all the rest of it, is I was having to preach in a way and serve a congregation in a way that was reaching to different cultural and socioeconomic levels than what most of them were comfortable with, because people want to live in their ghettos. We develop this, and I get the congregation comfortable with seeing points of view outside of their own little hole that they've been living in. That's the only thing that's going to be able to fix this. It's a combination of solid exegetical preaching and catechetical teaching with the ability to be able to adapt to the world outside the walls of the sanctuary. I think in a lot of confessional churches, they show up on Sunday morning and that's their experience of church. They're not big into the social service aspects and all the rest of it, not as much as they should be. Because I honestly think the church sold its birthright to the government a long time ago. The church used to manage all the schools. The church used to manage all the hospitals. The church used to handle all the social services. And what that did was it forced the church to engage with society. Now we all crawl back into our own little holes, and we're so inbred that we can't function outside the walls. It would be like your military boys not wanting to get off. It'd be like a bunch of Marines, Donald, that had gotten so comfortable being on the ship that they wouldn't want to take the beach. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, that ain't gonna happen.
No, but that's what the church,
I take your point.
that's what the church has become. A bunch of people that should be Marines, that all the Navy did was drive them up to the beach and they should be storming it, would rather be sitting around playing cards in the hull.
Well, listen, my friend, I need to get going.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to keep running my
You
mouth so
know,
much today.
so do you have any summary ideas, thoughts on Aimee Byrd as we close this?
In all honesty, in hindsight, I really have come to believe that Aimee Byrd was probably a plant that ingratiated herself. I don't know whether she started off as OPC and then became corrupted by the educational system, or if she was actually trained and sent in. Her ultimate goal was to start softening up the OPC to either break it or remake it like the PCUSA. I believe that she was working incredibly successfully. She managed to cause the PCA to kill off some of its better pastors that saw what the problem was, but then her hubris ended up getting her and she ended up getting revealed and they couldn't say anything. They couldn't do anything but do away with her. She should have been cut off the moment she released that first book. Her session, her presbytery should have killed her right then, but they didn't.
Because she is crafty.
Right.
She is
And they're
very,
just not smart. She's smarter than the men in the room.
and yet the men sniff something's wrong here because she's not being open. But no, they caught on in time. They nailed her.
They only caught on in time because of her mistakes.
Which are very few and far between. It's like in recovering from that volume, I'd say there's five, maybe six places out of the 200 and some odd pages, 250 pages, where she tips her hand and you see exactly her game.
Okay.
Meanwhile, everything else around it is a manipulative story.
And Donald, here's the problem. I didn't even read the whole thing. I did a brief summary of it and could tell them exactly who she was right off the bat. But because they had their prestigious Westminster degrees, I was just some redneck in North Carolina that had gone to a trashy seminary, and I obviously didn't know as much. I didn't bow down at the feet of Westminster, Philadelphia, and tell them how great they were. So even though I didn't even have to read the damn book, I could just glance through it and knew what she was up to. I didn't know what I was talking about.
Well, I'm getting down into the details, and we worked our way through masonry at one point, and now there's other issues. There's wokeism, homosexuality, women's ordination, and now Aimee Byrd. I just ordered, like I said earlier, three.
Well, you know that ultimately all of these are tied together, right?
Yes, yes, yes. I think you've nailed it with the hubris point.
But I want you to order one more book because it's going to be the key to all of this.
Okay.
And I want you to read this before you get into any of the other subjects. Order Saul Alinsky's Rules for Radicals.
Okay.
It's not long. It becomes the decoder ring. You know how they used to have decoder rings in the cereal boxes?
Yeah.
Once you read Rules for Radicals, you'll start to see how all of this works. I can't believe they allowed this to become so popularized in the public media back during 2020 because, and I guess people are just too stupid and don't read enough. Once you read that book, it's like showing their whole hand.
Okay. I'll check on that when I get off.
All right, we'll talk to you later, Don. I'll see you
Okay.
Friday.
See you later. Bye.
Bye.